As Lena finally sank into the softness of her sofa, her body ached with exhaustion. She let out a deep sigh, her frustration from the day's events still lingering. Just as she closed her eyes, her phone buzzed urgently on the coffee table. With a groan, Lena grabbed it, already dreading the idea of more work. Her heart sank as she saw the caller ID. It was her boss Sarah, the chief editor of the media company she worked for. "Hello." Lena answered wearily. "Lena, it's Sarah. We've got a situation." Sarah's voice was urgent. "What's going on?" Lena asked, her tiredness forgotten in an instant. "We just got a tip that a body has been found tied up in a sack near the river. I need you to get there ASAP and get all the details," Sarah instructed. Lena cursed under her breath as she hung up the phone. Of all the days, why now? She muttered, frustration boiling over. She had been looking forward to finally relaxing after a long and draining day, but fate had other plans. Dragging herself off the sofa, Lena couldn't help but feel the weight of her exhaustion. "Just what I needed," she grumbled as she slipped on her shoes, her mind still reeling from the sudden change in plans. Despite her tiredness, Lena knew she had a job to do. With a heavy sigh, she trudged out the door, each step feeling like a battle against her own fatigue. "Guess sleep will have to wait," she mumbled bitterly, steeling herself for the task ahead. As Lena reluctantly prepared to head out, her mind raced with thoughts of the evening she had anticipated slipping away. She sighed, realizing that the job demanded her immediate attention, regardless of her exhaustion. With a heavy heart and a tired body, she braced herself for the unexpected turn of events, knowing she had to focus on the task at hand. As Lena made her way to the crime scene, her mind raced with anticipation. She imagined the chaotic scene she was about to step into, filled with flashing lights, police tape, and the murmurs of bystanders. Each step brought her closer to the unknown, and she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at her. Upon arriving, Lena found herself amidst a throng of reporters and onlookers, all eagerly awaiting any news. She spotted a fellow journalist and approached them, hoping for some clarity amidst the chaos. "Hey, any updates on what's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with a mix of anticipation and frustration. The reporter shook their head. "Nothing concrete yet. The officers are still investigating," they replied, their voice barely audible over the hum of the crowd. Lena sighed, feeling a twinge of impatience at the lack of information. She glanced around, noting the police cars and officers bustling about. Despite the chaos, she knew she had to be patient and wait for more details to emerge. Amidst the commotion, Lena joined the cluster of reporters surrounding the police officers near the police shield, all eager for any scrap of information. "Excuse me, officer, can you tell us what's going on?" Lena called out, her voice barely audible over the noise of the crowd. The officer glanced at her briefly before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, folks, we're still gathering information. As soon as we have something, we'll let you know," he replied, his tone firm but sympathetic. Frustration simmered among the reporters as they exchanged glances, each one itching for a breakthrough in the case. Lena sighed, feeling the tension mounting with each passing moment. She knew she had to stay focused and persistent, despite the lack of immediate answers. After a while of waiting, a police officer, likely the investigating officer with a higher ranking, approached the crowd. He was tall, medium-toned with a shaved head and wore cool shades. At first glance, he appeared to be a firm and dense police officer in person. The name Jadif was written on his uniform. Lena's gaze immediately shifted to the newcomer, recognizing him as someone with authority and potentially valuable information. She, along with the other reporters, edged closer, eager to hear what he had to say. Once the reporters approached him, and it was total chaotic and noisy, he raised his hands in a calming gesture, hoping to quiet down the crowd of reporters. "All right, settle down everyone," he called out over the din, his voice firm and authoritative. Slowly, the reporters began to hush, their eager whispers fading as they focused their attention on him. He waited until the noise subsided before speaking again. "Thank you. Now, I know you're all anxious for information, but please bear with us as we gather the facts." His demeanor was calm yet commanding, instilling a sense of order amidst the chaos. Lena watched as the reporters around her listened intently, their cameras and notepads at the ready. She knew that whatever he had to say would be crucial in piecing together the story unfolding before them. The reporters, one by one, started to ask questions, such as who was this person who was killed, what was the condition, or whether the body found in the sack belonged to a man or a woman, and so on. The officer, with a serious look on his face, started to speak. As he answered all the questions, he told that the victim is a woman. Her head is shaved. She seems to be abused in a naked state. Everything else can be said only after further investigation and post-mortem. So, please calm down and go back, he continued, his voice firm yet reassuring. We will inform you if there is something else or if we get any more information about the case. Thank you for your cooperation. Lena listened intently, noting the gravity of the situation. She glanced around at the other reporters, sensing the weight of the news they had just received. With a nod of understanding, she prepared to leave the scene, knowing that there would be more to uncover as the investigation progressed. After coming back, Lena received a call from her editor-in-chief Sophia, asking her to follow the case. Lena was also very curious about the case, finding the incident both disturbing and interesting. This was the first time Lena had heard of such a case in their state, and it had never happened before. The next week went by, but there wasn't much information about the case. The police seemed to be in a state of confusion, as if they were searching in the dark. The information provided by the police to the public and the media was as follows. The victim was identified as Shraddha, a 28-year-old woman. Her head and eyebrows were shaved, and her body had been cleaned before being placed into a sack. This meticulous cleanup made gathering additional evidence difficult, as no fingerprints were found. The police believed the crime was likely committed by a man. Lena, like other members of the media, received this information from the police. As she digested the details, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. It was the first time such a case had occurred in their state, and the lack of evidence only added to the mystery. Shraddha's shaved head and clean body hinted at a calculated and disturbing crime, leaving everyone with more questions than answers. As Lena sat at her desk, chatting with her colleagues while sipping on a cup of tea, the topic of the case came up. One of her colleagues remarked, "I don't think it's over yet. I have a gut feeling that this is not the end, but the beginning of something." Lena glanced up, intrigued by the statement. The room fell silent as they pondered the implications of what had happened. The feeling of unease lingered, hanging thick in the air like a shroud of uncertainty. "I agree," Lena finally spoke up, breaking the silence. "There's something about this case that doesn't sit right with me. It feels like there's more to it than meets the eye." Her colleagues nodded in agreement, each lost in their own thoughts. The realization that they were just scratching the surface of a much larger mystery settled in, leaving them with a sense of foreboding. As they continued to discuss the case, one of Lena's colleagues expressed, "I can't shake the feeling that we're on the brink of uncovering something far more sinister than we had ever imagined." Upon hearing this, Lena's eyebrows twitched, and she sighed, her gaze drifting off into the void. Alan, who had been chatting with the group, called out to Lena, snapping her out of her thoughts. "Hey, Lena, what's going on?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Are you worried about the case? You've been looking so pale and tired these days. Do you have any problems?" Lena blinked, taken aback by Alan's direct questions. She glanced at her colleagues, who nodded in agreement, their expressions mirroring Alan's concern. Taking a deep breath, Lena decided to open up. "Yeah, the case has been weighing on my mind," she admitted, her voice tinged with weariness. "It's just, there's something about it that doesn't sit right with me. And with each passing day, the lack of progress is getting to me." Alan listened attentively, nodding in understanding. "I get it," he said sympathetically. "It's a tough situation, but remember, we're all in this together. If you need to talk, or anything, we're here for you." Lena offered a weak smile of gratitude, feeling a bit lighter knowing she had her colleagues' support. She let out a sigh, and told them that their boss Sophia was urging her to make a cover story about the case. "But without any clues from the police, what can I do?" she wondered aloud. Her colleagues exchanged concerned glances, understanding the predicament Lena was facing. Alan leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe we could try a different approach," he suggested. "We don't necessarily need clues from the police to create a compelling story. We could focus on the community's reaction, interview witnesses, or explore the possible motives behind the crime." Lena nodded, considering Alan's suggestion. "You're right," she agreed. "We can dig deeper into the background of the victim, see if there were any conflicts or controversies in her life that could provide leads. And we can also talk to people in the neighborhood, see if anyone noticed anything suspicious. Her other colleague Sarah chimed in. We could also analyze similar cases from other places, see if there are any patterns or connections that could shed light on this one. Sometimes looking at things from a different angle can reveal unexpected clues. Lena felt a glimmer of hope as she listened to their ideas. Thanks guys, she said gratefully. You've given me a lot to think about. With your help, maybe we can still crack this case wide open. Lena agreed. Maybe it's only in our state that we didn't find any similar case. Perhaps there are other cases in different places, other states. Alan nodded, his eyes lighting up with excitement. Exactly. We could reach out to journalists in other states, see if they've encountered similar cases. Collaborating with them might give us fresh insights and lead us to new clues. Sarah added, and we can also look into past cases that were initially unsolved but later cracked. There might be similarities or connections that we've overlooked. Lena's spirits lifted at the prospect of exploring new avenues. That's a great idea, she said, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Let's get to work. We may not have much to go on right now, but I'm confident that together, we can uncover the truth behind this mystery. As they were talking, one of their colleagues, Ram, rushed near them with an anxious face. Guys, listen! He exclaimed, out of breath. A similar body was found in a sack on the waste bin at Silver Line Road, and it seems to be a woman. Lena and her colleagues exchanged startled looks, their hearts racing at the news. Ram, calm down, Alan said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Take a deep breath and tell us slowly. As Ram regained his composure, he continued, this time it was found by a man passing by. He saw an arm sticking out of the sack. A wave of shock washed over the group as they processed the information. Another victim. Lena whispered, her mind racing with questions. Could these cases be connected somehow? Once they reached the scene, they received the information that the body was in a very similar state to the previous one. This time, the injuries and the condition of the body are strikingly similar, a police officer informed them. It's highly likely that both cases were done by the same person. Their hearts sank at the confirmation. The chilling realization that a serial killer might be at large sent shivers down their spines. They exchanged solemn looks with their colleagues, understanding the gravity of the situation. By evening, they got more information regarding the victim. The victim was a woman, aged 26. Her name was Dia. What was more shocking is that both the victims had no connection with each other. Neither family, friends, work, nor anything else. They were complete strangers. As Lena and her colleagues digested this new information, a sense of bewilderment washed over them. It's as if the killer is choosing their victims at random, Sarah remarked, her voice filled with disbelief. Alan nodded in agreement. It's highly unusual for serial killers to target unrelated individuals, he added. But it also makes them harder to track down. Without any discernible pattern, it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. Lena furrowed her brow, her mind racing with possibilities. If they're complete strangers, then how is the killer selecting them? She mused aloud. And why these specific victims? There has to be some connection, even if it's not obvious. While they were discussing it, Ellen, with a hint of doubt, asked, what if the killer is a psycho? The question hung heavy in the air, casting a shadow over their conversation. Lena considered the possibility, her mind grappling with the idea of a deranged individual committing such heinous acts. It's a chilling thought, she replied, her voice tinged with unease. But it's possible. We can't rule out anything at this point. Colleagues agreed to it, and they feared that there would be more victims. Upon hearing this, Lena was a little disturbed and uneasy. She sat there, absent-mindedly groping her hands, her mind filled with worry. Her colleagues noticed her demeanor, and concern crept into their expressions. Are you feeling unwell, Lena? Sarah asked gently, her voice filled with concern. Lena looked up, realizing that her unease was evident. I'm just a bit shaken by all of this, she admitted, offering a weak smile. Alan, seeing Lena's state, offered her a ride home. Lena, why don't you take the rest of the day off? You look like you could use some rest, he suggested kindly. I can give you a ride home if you'd like. Lena hesitated for a moment, grateful for the offer of support. Thank you, Alan, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. I think that would be a good idea. With that, she gathered her things, feeling grateful for the concern and support of her colleagues. As Alan dropped Lena off at her house, he commented, "Oh, you're staying here alone. I could understand your fear now. It's an easy target for the killer to get, you being alone in this large area." "Oh, I was just kidding, don't worry. Just give me a call if there's anything." Lena chuckled nervously. "Thanks, Alan. Don't worry, I'll make sure to keep my doors always locked tight." She welcomed Alan for a drink, offering to prepare something for him. But he politely refused, saying he had other work to do and had to leave. She waved goodbye to Alan and went to her room, recollecting all that had happened until now. Lying on her bed, she couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that lingered from the day's events. The thought of the victims and the possibility of more weighing heavily on her mind. She closed her eyes, trying to clear her thoughts, but the images of the crime scenes kept replaying in her head. All she could see after closing her eyes was the blood and screams of victims echoing in her mind, disturbing her deeply. It was as if the scenes had etched themselves onto her consciousness, refusing to fade away even in the darkness of her room. She tossed and turned, unable to escape the relentless images that played in her mind, each one more haunting than the last. Her thoughts were consumed by the echoes of tragedy, leaving her restless and unsettled. It became clear that she couldn't sleep now, so she got up, getting some air, and went out. After one more week, a new body was also found, that of a 30-year-old woman, and the similar pattern was followed. There was no connection between the three victims. It was made clear by the police that this seems to be a serial killing, and there may be more victims. The mode of killing seemed to be like that of a psychopath, and the victims appeared to be randomly chosen. A notice of caution was given to the public, warning them to be vigilant. As the news of the serial killing spread, the public grew increasingly restless. Fear and uncertainty gripped the community, with many worried about their safety. The possibility of a psychopathic killer on the loose sent shockwaves through the city, and people were on edge. Social media buzzed with speculation and theories about the identity of the killer. The hashtag #psychokiller started trending, with users sharing their thoughts and concerns. News outlets picked up on the story, reporting on the latest developments and offering advice on how to stay safe. Amidst the chaos, Lena couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, wary of every shadow and unfamiliar face. The once bustling streets now felt deserted, as people avoided going out alone, fearing they could be the next target. Despite the heightened sense of danger, life went on, albeit with a palpable sense of fear looming over the city. Police patrols increased, and security measures were tightened in an effort to apprehend the killer and bring an end to the terror gripping the community. But until then, the fear of the unknown hung heavy in the air, casting a shadow over the once vibrant city. Amidst this situation, another body was found, and the police were in total confusion. The discovery of yet another victim only added to the growing sense of panic and uncertainty in the city. With each new body, the pressure on the police to solve the case intensified. However, despite their efforts, they seemed no closer to catching the elusive killer. The lack of leads and the seemingly random nature of the killings left them baffled and frustrated. The public's fear and frustration mounted as the body count continued to rise. People demanded answers and action from the authorities, but there were no easy solutions to be found. The once bustling streets now felt like a ghost town, with residents too afraid to venture out alone. Lena, like many others, felt a sense of helplessness and fear, and she found herself constantly looking over her shoulder. As the city grappled with the ongoing crisis, the killer remained at large, lurking in the shadows, and the sense of unease only deepened with each passing day. On top of all these worries, her boss was making it difficult for her to create a new story on the killer. Despite the mounting pressure, Lena struggled to find a fresh angle or any substantial leads to pursue. The weight of the ongoing investigation seemed to bear down on her shoulders, making each day more challenging than the last. To add to her stress, Lena was given a new assistant, a young intern named Rupa. As Rupa nervously approached Lena's desk on her first day, Lena greeted her with a warm smile. "Hi Rupa, I'm Lena. Welcome aboard," she said, trying to ease the young intern's nerves. "Thank you, Lena. I'm excited to be here," Rupa replied, her voice tinged with excitement and a hint of anxiety. "Great. Let's get you settled in, Lena said, gesturing for Rupa to take a seat. First, let's discuss what we're working on. Have you been following the news about the psycho killer case? Rupa nodded eagerly. Yes, I've been keeping up with it. It's so scary what's been happening. Lena sighed, nodding in agreement. It really is. And it's our job to try and make sense of it all. But lately, it feels like we're hitting a dead end. Rupa's eyes widened with concern. Is there anything I can do to help? Lena smiled gratefully at Rupa's offer. Actually, yes. I could use an extra set of eyes on this. Let's start by going through the latest updates together and see if we can come up with any new angles to explore. As they delved into the details of the case, Lena was impressed by Rupa's enthusiasm and quick grasp of the situation. Despite the seriousness of the topic, their conversation flowed easily, and Lena found herself feeling hopeful for the first time in a while. Wow, I didn't realize how much goes into creating a story like this, Rupa remarked, looking slightly overwhelmed but also excited by the challenge. It's definitely a lot to take in, but you're doing great, Lena reassured her, offering a supportive smile. And with your fresh perspective, I think we might just crack this case wide open. As the day went on, Lena and Rupa worked tirelessly, brainstorming ideas and discussing possible leads. Despite the challenges ahead, Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she had a capable assistant by her side. Together, they were determined to uncover the truth behind the psycho killer case, one clue at a time. As they delved into the details of the case, Lena was impressed by Rupa's enthusiasm and quick grasp of the situation. It's definitely a lot to take in, Lena remarked, but you're doing great. Rupa nodded eagerly, her eyes alight with determination. Thanks, Lena. I just can't believe someone would do something so horrible. I know, Lena agreed, her expression grave. It's terrifying to think that there's someone out there capable of such cruelty. Rupa's brows furrowed in anger. That psycho killer deserves to be caught and punished for what they've done. Lena nodded in agreement. Absolutely. And we're going to do everything we can to help bring them to justice. As they continued their discussion, Rupa couldn't help but express her frustration with the killer. It's infuriating that they're still out there, lurking in the shadows. They need to be stopped before they hurt anyone else. I couldn't agree more, Lena replied, her voice filled with determination. We'll do everything in our power to make sure they're caught and put behind bars where they belong. Rupa nodded, a steely resolve in her eyes. Let's do it, Lena. Let's catch this monster and make sure they never hurt anyone again. After working with her for a few days, Lena realized that Rupa was a cheerful and happy girl, always energetic and enthusiastic. Lena couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy towards her seemingly endless optimism, but she also couldn't deny how much she appreciated that part of Rupa. Despite the grim nature of their work, Rupa's positivity was infectious, and it helped to lighten the heavy atmosphere surrounding the psycho killer case. Lena found herself smiling more often and feeling more hopeful about their progress, all thanks to Rupa's bright outlook on life. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the office, Lena couldn't help but admire Rupa's enthusiasm. You know, Rupa, I really admire your positivity, Lena said, unable to contain her admiration any longer. Rupa looked up from her work, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Thanks, Lena. I just believe that no matter how bad things may seem, there's always a reason to smile. Lena couldn't help but smile at Rupa's response. Despite the challenges they faced, she felt grateful to have someone like Rupa by her side, reminding her to look on the bright side of life. For the past 2 to 3 weeks everything was calm, and no new bodies were found. The city breathed a collective sigh of relief, thinking that perhaps the worst was over and that they could finally return to some semblance of normalcy. Despite the respite, the memory of the psycho killer still lingered in the minds of the residents, a constant reminder of the terror they had endured. However, behind the scenes the police continued their relentless pursuit of the culprit. They refused to let their guard down, knowing all too well that the killer could strike again at any moment. Despite the lack of new leads, they were determined to bring the perpetrator to justice and put an end to the reign of terror once and for all. Lena and Rupa continued to follow the case closely, despite the temporary lull in activity. They knew that the calm was only temporary and that the killer could resurface at any time. As they pored over the details of the case, they remained vigilant, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that the city was finally experiencing some peace. She hoped and prayed that it would last, but deep down, she knew that the calm was merely the calm before the storm. Since things had calmed down for these days, Lena went back to her routines and resumed her usual activities. She went out with her colleagues to get some fresh air, spending her time chatting and eating out. In the evenings, she hit the gym to unwind and stay active, and occasionally indulged in some retail therapy by going shopping. But somewhere she felt a sense of lose, like she missed something. One day, in between her busy schedule, Lena welcomed her assistant, Rupa, to her home. She invited Rupa over to discuss work in a more relaxed and comfortable environment. As they settled in, Lena made some coffee and they got down to business, brainstorming ideas and strategizing their approach to the ongoing case. Being in a more casual setting allowed them to bounce ideas off each other freely, and Lena appreciated having Rupa's fresh perspective on things. The atmosphere was relaxed yet focused as they delved into the details of the case, mapping out their next steps and discussing potential leads. As Lena and Rupa settled into their discussion, Lena couldn't help but notice how cheerful and energetic Rupa was. "You know, Rupa," Lena began, "you're like a breath of fresh air. Always smiling and spreading positivity wherever you go." Rupa beamed at the compliment, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "Thank you, Lena. I've always believed that a positive attitude can make all the difference, especially in tough times like these." Lena nodded in agreement. "You're absolutely right. Your energy is infectious, and it really helps to lift everyone's spirits, including mine." Rupa's smile widened, and she blushed slightly at the praise. "I'm just happy to be here, and to be able to help in any way I can," she replied earnestly. "Well, you're doing an amazing job," Lena said sincerely. "I'm grateful to have you as my assistant, Rupa. Your positivity is exactly what we need to keep going, especially when things get tough." Rupa's smile grew even brighter, and Lena couldn't help but feel a surge of appreciation for her cheerful presence. Together, they continued their discussion, their hearts lighter, and their minds focused as they worked towards their common goal. While they were engrossed in their conversation, Lena noticed the coffee sitting on the table, forgotten and growing cold. "Oh Rupa, your coffee," Lena exclaimed, gesturing towards the cup. "You should drink that before it gets cold. It won't be as good once it's cold." Rupa glanced at the cup and laughed sheepishly. "Oops, you're right. Thanks for reminding me, Lena." She picked up the cup and took a sip, savoring the warm, comforting taste. Lena smiled, glad that she had caught it in time. "No problem. I'd hate for it to go to waste. Besides, a warm cup of coffee is the perfect companion for our brainstorming session." Rupa nodded in agreement, taking another sip of her coffee. "Definitely. It helps keep the ideas flowing." As they continued their discussion, Lena listened with a mix of envy and admiration as Rupa shared stories about her happy childhood and close-knit family. "Your family sounds amazing," Rupa. Lena commented, a hint of longing in her voice. Rupa beamed, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Oh, they really are. I've had the best upbringing anyone could ask for. My parents have always been so supportive and loving, and I'm really close to my siblings too." Lena smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "That sounds wonderful. I wish I could say the same about my family. My childhood wasn't exactly a happy one." Rupa's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry to hear that, Lena. What was it like for you?" Lena sighed, her gaze distant as she recalled her past. "My parents were always busy with work, and there was a lot of tension at home. We hardly ever spent time together, and when we did, it was usually filled with arguments and resentment." "That must have been really tough," Rupa said, her voice filled with compassion. "It was," Lena admitted, her tone heavy with emotion. "But I've learned to cope with it over the years. It's made me stronger in some ways, I guess." Their conversation then shifted to Rupa's experiences as she shared more about her happy memories with her family and friends. Lena found herself listening intently, captivated by Rupa's infectious enthusiasm and zest for life. "We used to have the best family gatherings," Rupa recalled with a smile. "Everyone would come together, and there would be laughter and music and so much joy. Those were some of the happiest times of my life." Lena couldn't help but feel a pang of envy as she listened to Rupa's stories. She longed for that sense of belonging and warmth that Rupa seemed to have experienced growing up. As they continued to chat, Rupa's eyelids began to feel heavy, weighed down by the warmth of the room and the comfort of Lena's home. She fought to keep her eyes open, but the exhaustion soon caught up with her. "Lena, I'm sorry," Rupa yawned, rubbing her eyes. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm suddenly feeling so sleepy." Lena smiled understandingly. "It's okay, Rupa. You must be tired. Why don't you lie down on the couch for a bit? You can rest here for as long as you need." Rupa nodded gratefully, her eyelids drooping. "Thank you, Lena. That sounds wonderful." With that, she settled onto the couch, her breathing steady and peaceful as she drifted off into a deep sleep. When Rupa woke up, her eyes felt blurry and her body was heavy and weak. She tried to move, but realized she couldn't. Panic surged through her as she struggled to make sense of her surroundings. All she could see was a dimly lit lamp hanging above her head, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Her heart raced as she realized her hands were tied, rendering her completely helpless. The room was dark and gloomy, sending shivers down her spine. Fear gripped her as she tried to call out for Lena, but her voice failed her. Not a single word escaped her lips, leaving her feeling even more terrified and alone. Rupa's mind raced with questions, but there were no answers. Where was she? How did she get here? And most importantly, who had done this to her? She struggled against her restraints, but they held firm, trapping her in this nightmare. Tears welled up in her eyes as the full weight of her situation sank in. She was trapped alone and utterly terrified. All she could do was pray that someone would find her soon and that she would make it out of this ordeal alive. Her mind was in total chaos. She was certain that she had fallen asleep on Lena's sofa while they were talking, so how had she ended up here? Panic surged through her as she worried about Lena and what might have happened to her. She strained to look around, but her surroundings were shrouded in darkness, making it impossible to see anything. Rupa's heart pounded in her chest as she struggled against her restraints, desperate to move or make a sound, but it was all in vain. She felt utterly helpless, trapped in this nightmare with no way out. Fear gnawed at her insides as she imagined the worst-case scenarios, praying that Lena was safe and that someone would come to her rescue soon. Tears streamed down Rupa's face as she battled against her bonds, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. She couldn't shake the feeling of dread that washed over her, wondering what fate awaited her in this terrifying place. All she could do was hope and pray that help would come soon, before it was too late. After several attempts, Rupa felt utterly exhausted and drained of energy. Though she had been tired before, she now felt even more fatigued. As she lay there completely helpless, a figure approached. The person was wearing an overcoat, gloves, a hoodie, and had their head covered. They weren't too tall, but their body appeared sturdy. Despite the well-fit body, it was clear that this wasn't a man. As the figure drew nearer, Rupa felt a tingling sensation wash over her, sending a chill down her spine. The shadow gradually faded, revealing the person to be Lena. Rupa's heart skipped a beat as she realized who it was. Lena. Rupa's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes widening in disbelief. Lena's features were obscured by the darkness, but Rupa could see that her body resembled Lena's fit and muscular frame. A sense of dread washed over Rupa as Lena drew closer, her mind racing with fear and confusion. As Rupa realized that she could talk now, she shouted at Lena, her voice trembling with fear and frustration, "Why did you do this to me? What are you doing? What is happening here?" Lena's figure loomed in the dim light, a shadowy presence that sent shivers down Rupa's spine. But there was no response, no explanation from Lena, just an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. Rupa's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for a reply, her mind racing with fear and confusion. She struggled against her restraints, desperate to break free and escape from whatever nightmare she had found herself in. But Lena remained silent, her expression obscured by the darkness. The lack of response only fueled Rupa's panic, leaving her feeling even more helpless and alone in the face of the unknown. Rupa desperately wished for it all to be a dream, praying that she would wake up safe and sound in her own bed. She tried to shake herself out of the nightmare, but the restraints held her firmly in place. She struggled and strained against them, each movement met with resistance and frustration. After what felt like an eternity, Lena finally spoke, her voice calm and unsettling. "Oh, you could speak now. That's nice," she said, her words dripping with a chilling tone. "I thought I would be very lonely, here that you couldn't speak." Rupa's heart raced as she listened to Lena's words, her mind reeling with disbelief. The sinister smile on Lena's face sent a shiver down her spine, filling her with a sense of dread. She couldn't comprehend what was happening, couldn't understand why Lena was doing this to her. Tears welled up in Rupa's eyes as she realized the extent of her predicament. She was trapped alone with Lena in this terrifying ordeal. Fear consumed her as she struggled to make sense of it all, her thoughts spinning in a whirlwind of confusion and terror. With a trembling and pleading voice, Rupa asked Lena, "What is happening here? Why are you doing this to me? Please, tell me this is a dream or you're playing a prank. Please let me go. I'm scared. Please." Her voice started low, a desperate plea for answers, but as Lena remained silent, it grew louder, escalating into a cry for help. Tears streamed down Rupa's face as she begged for mercy, her heart pounding in her chest. But Lena just looked at her with disdain, a mocking smile playing on her lips. "You can shout as much as you want. It doesn't matter because no one would come here," Lena said, her voice dripping with malice. "This is my place, and no one will think there is a place like this on my estate. How can someone come in here while I am the only person living here?" Rupa's heart sank as Lena's words sank in. She was truly alone, trapped in Lena's twisted game with no hope of rescue. Panic surged through her as she realized the full extent of her predicament, her cries for help falling on deaf ears. With each passing moment, Rupa's fear grew, her mind racing with thoughts of what Lena might do to her. She struggled against her restraints, desperate to escape from this nightmare. But Lena just watched her, a cruel glint in her eyes. As Rupa's pleas for mercy turned into desperate cries for help, Lena's expression twisted into one of disdain. "You think anyone would hear you?" she sneered. "This is my private estate, and there's no one around for miles. You're all alone, Rupa. And you'll stay that way." Rupa's heart pounded in her chest as Lena's words hit her like a physical blow. She was trapped at the mercy of a woman who seemed to take pleasure in her suffering. The realization filled her with a bone-deep terror, leaving her feeling more helpless than ever. Tears continued to flow down Rupa's cheeks as she struggled to come to terms with her situation. She had to find a way out, had to escape from Lena's clutches before it was too late. But with Lena's sinister gaze fixed on her, she knew it wouldn't be easy. Rupa was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Her tears had dried up, leaving her feeling drained and empty. She lay there, silently sobbing, her mind a whirlwind of fear and despair. She couldn't comprehend why Lena was doing this to her, why she had become the target of such cruelty. Seeing Rupa's calm demeanor, Lena's voice cut through the silence. "Why did you stop crying? Why don't you continue that?" she asked, her tone mocking. "I was just enjoying it. It's really nice to hear you cry. A very happy person, always smiling, and now crying for my mercy. It's so. I don't know what to say. It's just so good. You know that. Don't kill my joy, please. I'm begging you, okay? If you kill my joy like this, oh my God. Don't tell me that I didn't tell you. You may end up like those women that we are investigating about." Rupa's blood ran cold as Lena's words sunk in. She listened in horror as Lena described the fate of the other victims, the ones who had cried like her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized the true danger she was in. Those who cried. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," Lena continued, her voice dripping with malice. "They were so happy. Like you. Those with their happiness in front of me. I saw them happy, cheerful. I was so angry. But, they will hate to crying like you. But, at one point they do stop crying like you. Kill my joy." I felt so frustrated and anger. Anger was so much filled in my heart. "Don't do that, dear. Because just because they stopped crying and destroyed my joy, I gave them pain. A lot of pain. In the end, they all ended up stopped moving, and I had to throw them away." Rupa's mind raced as she tried to make sense of Lena's twisted logic. She felt a chill run down her spine as Lena's threats hung in the air, leaving her paralyzed with fear. "Don't stop crying or I don't know what I will do," Lena warned, her voice cold and calculating. You don't want to end up like them, do you? Rupa's breath caught in her throat as she realized the gravity of her situation. She was trapped with a sadistic killer, someone who took pleasure in the suffering of others. Her only chance of survival was to keep Lena entertained, to play along with her sick game until she could find a way to escape. But even as she nodded in agreement, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of her stomach. She knew that Lena was not to be trusted, that her words were filled with lies and deceit. She had to tread carefully, to bide her time until the moment was right to make her move. As the minutes turned into hours, Rupa's mind raced with thoughts of escape. She listened intently to Lena's every word, searching for any hint of weakness or opportunity. But Lena remained as cold and calculating as ever, her gaze fixed on Rupa with an unsettling intensity. In the darkness of the room, Rupa felt a flicker of hope begin to stir within her. She may be trapped for now, but she refused to give up. She would find a way out, no matter what it took. She just had to stay strong, to keep her wits about her until the moment was right. With determination burning in her heart, Rupa braced herself for the challenges that lay ahead. She would survive this ordeal, no matter what Lena had planned. And when she finally escaped, she would make sure that Lena paid for her crimes, that no one else would ever suffer at her hands again. After regaining her composure and calming herself down, Rupa mustered the courage to ask Lena the burning questions that had been plaguing her mind. Why are you doing this? Why did you kill all these people, all these women? What did you gain from that? Lena's response sent shivers down Rupa's spine. Because they were too happy, Lena replied, her voice laced with bitterness. They were so happy that it made me feel so annoyed. They were so happy in front of me, who was always sad. I was always sad, never happy. I always had to go through hard times. You were so happy too, right? You wouldn't understand what I felt. You can't understand that. Rupa's heart sank as she listened to Lena's twisted justification for her heinous crimes. It was clear that Lena was deeply troubled, her mind warped by years of bitterness and resentment. So, what is the use of telling all this to you? Lena continued, her tone cold and dismissive. Just stay here and cry until I'm satisfied. Okay. With that, Lena abruptly left the room, leaving Rupa alone with her thoughts once again. As she sat there in the dimly lit room, Rupa couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over her. She knew that Lena's words were filled with lies and manipulation, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread at what Lena might do next. Determined not to give in to despair, Rupa tried to focus on finding a way to escape. She knew that her only chance of survival was to stay strong and keep her wits about her until the moment was right. As the minutes turned into hours, Rupa's mind raced with thoughts of escape. She carefully surveyed her surroundings, searching for any potential weaknesses or vulnerabilities. But Lena had been thorough in her preparations, leaving Rupa with few options for escape. Despite the odds stacked against her, Rupa refused to give up hope. She knew that she had to keep fighting, to stay strong and resilient in the face of adversity. With each passing moment, her determination grew stronger, fueling her resolve to survive. As the hours stretched on, Rupa remained vigilant, ready to seize any opportunity that presented itself. She knew that her fate was in her own hands, and she would do whatever it took to ensure that she made it out of this nightmare alive. With a surge of adrenaline, Rupa managed to loosen the grip of the tight tape binding her legs. It took several attempts, but eventually, one leg was free. Gritting her teeth, she used her freed leg to pull a nearby tray closer, her heart pounding with anticipation. To her horror, the tray contained sharp objects, including knives and other tools Lena had likely used to torture her previous victims. Steeling herself, Rupa kicked the tray until it was within reach of her tied hands. With trembling fingers, she attempted to grab a knife, her hands shaking as she worked to free herself. Despite the pain and exhaustion, Rupa refused to give up. With her tied hands, she managed to grab hold of a knife, her fingers fumbling with the blade as she struggled to maintain her grip. With sheer determination, she began to saw away at the tape binding her wrists, each movement sending jolts of pain shooting through her arms. After what felt like an eternity, Rupa finally cut through the last of the tape, feeling a surge of relief as she pulled her hands free. With her legs still weak from being bound for so long, she stumbled to her feet, using the wall for support as she made her way towards the door. As Rupa finally untied her hands, she winced in pain as the knife had cut into her skin while she struggled to free herself. Her hands were bleeding, but she pushed the pain aside, focusing solely on her escape. With determination in her eyes, she prepared to make a run for it, her heart pounding with adrenaline. However, just as she reached for the door, a sudden clap and a horrifying laughter echoed through the room, sending a shiver down her spine. Turning around, Rupa's blood ran cold as she saw Lena standing in the corner silently watching her with a chilling smile on her face. "Oh dear, I was really enjoying your struggle to escape," Lena taunted, clapping her hands together mockingly. "But you're so resilient. I like it. But if you want to escape from here, that's a different story." Rupa's breath caught in her throat as Lena's words sank in. She could feel the fear gripping her, threatening to overwhelm her. But she refused to give in. With trembling hands, she scanned the room for something, anything that could help her. Finally, her eyes landed on a knife lying nearby, and with a shaky hand, she reached for it. Brandishing the knife, Rupa faced Lena, her voice trembling but filled with determination. "Let me go, Lena," she demanded, her heart racing. "I won't hesitate to use this if I have to. Just let me leave, and I won't tell anyone about this. Please." As Lena saw Rupa pointing the knife towards her, she broke out into laughter, a sinister, mocking laughter that sent chills down Rupa's spine. Despite her trembling fear, Rupa stood her ground, holding the knife steady as Lena approached. With each step Lena took, Rupa's fear intensified. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. And then, in a sudden burst of adrenaline, they collided, grappling with each other in a frantic struggle for control. In a desperate attempt to escape, Rupa managed to push Lena to the ground. Seizing the opportunity, she scrambled towards the door, her mind racing with thoughts of freedom. But as her hand reached for the doorknob, she was met with a jolt of electricity that sent her reeling backward, weakened and helpless. As Rupa lay on the ground stunned and defeated, Lena dusted herself off with a triumphant smile. Slowly she approached Rupa, her eyes gleaming with malice. With a cruel laugh, Lena dragged Rupa back to where she had escaped from, ensuring that there would be no chance of freedom for her.